Dice, yeah, ay, ay.
Good day and welcome. I am William, narrator for the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. What if the same faith that carried you through childhood suffering was the thing that sent you into combat zones as a military chaplain and back into the lives of wounded people? Oscar talks with Dr. Larry Brant, Navy chaplain, combat veteran, author of Restoring the Broken, a ministry leader's guide to understanding and healing moral injury. A minister who spent life serving people carrying invisible wounds, from Marine in Afghanistan to homeless veterans battling PTSD and addiction. Now a word from our sponsor. Oscar wrote a wonderful children's book called Logan, The Strong-Minded Little Elephant. He also created a wonderful song for his children's book, which is at the end of this episode. Check it out.
Meet Logan, the strong-minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown-ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strengthen their hearts. Logan, the strong-minded little elephant, by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of FYI I Am Damaged, where the healed, healing, and others share their wisdom. Today I'm joined by Larry Brant, author, Navy chaplain, combat veteran, and minister. Thank you for joining me, Larry.
It's my pleasure.
Now, how do you like to introduce who you are and what you really do for people carrying invisible wounds?
Well, a little bit about myself. You already said my name. I'm Larry Brant. I'm currently a Navy chaplain. I will be exiting the Navy this summer when I turn 62, and will be moving into another ministry position. But my background is I grew up in the Midwest. Actually was a worship pastor for a while. Got my bachelor's and master's in music, actually, and was a associate pastor in churches for over 25 years. And then in 2007, I felt called to become a military chaplain, and had to go back to school, had to lose some weight in order for that to happen. Also had to get an age waiver because when I came in 2009, I was actually 45 years old. So didn't have any previous experience, just kind of old and crazy and called, and joined the Navy at 45. And probably not much more than a year later, found myself with a Marine Corps infantry battalion in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, with combat happening all around, and picked up PTSD myself from that combat experience. Then fast forward a few years, in 2020, I was accepted into another Navy program so that I could learn how to minister in the hospital environment. And so was sent to San Diego for that program. And in that program, you work 6 months in the Navy hospital in San Diego and 6 months in the VA program in San Diego. And so that was an interesting experience because obviously, if you remember, that was the height of COVID. And so I was the ICU chaplain at Naval Hospital San Diego, and we were losing 1 to 2 people a day in the ICU, and just with trying to do ministry to the families who were hurting, but also to the medical providers who were just devastated by not being able to stop all of these deaths. And then moving over to the VA, I was placed in what's called a PTSD domiciliary. It's a place called the Aspire Center, and it's amazing. I wish that the VA would replicate it in other cities, but what this place does was they take homeless veterans off the streets of San Diego who are diagnosed with PTSD. They bring them into the facility for 6 months, and they help them get clean because the majority of them are addicted to something. They help them get clean. They address their PTSD, their moral injury, and other issues, give them the capabilities to work with that, help them find a job, and help them find housing. And they have an 85% success rate, which is amazing in those type of programs. And so from there, I came here to 29 Palms, which is in the middle of the Mojave Desert at a big Marine Corps base, which is where I'm currently stationed. I was the hospital chaplain for 3 years. And I took what I learned at the previous program and with the VA and began working with people with PTSD and moral injury here on the base. And that's pretty much where I'm at, what I do. I left the hospital in fall of 2004 and moved over to what we call the green side. So I'm with a Marine Corps unit again. I'm with headquarters battalion here on the base. And that's what we do is in addition to providing ministry to the Marines, we're working with people here on the base, helping them to deal with their PTSD, with their moral injury, and trying to fight the good fight one life at a time.
I hear you, and thank you for your service. I have family who were in the Marines, and much respect to those and to those who you serve, in your capacity. Now,
Appreciate that.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Now, before the uniform and the book, what did faith and church look like growing up, and how did those early experiences shape the way you see God, suffering, and the human soul?
Okay. Well, growing up, I grew up in a Christian family, a family that went to church every Sunday. Um, my dad used to say that I started going to church 9 months before I was born because we were there. You know, my dad was a trustee of the church. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. Oh gosh, we figured it up before she passed away. She was a Sunday school teacher for about 84 years out of her 96. And so faith was always very strong, very present, but there was also that understanding of suffering. Before I came along, my parents had lost one child in an accident. He had tried to beat a car across the street and darted out in front of a vehicle, and that poor driver um, hit him, and he did not survive. Um, and so my parents had a pretty good understanding of what it meant to suffer, but still have your faith, and to know that God sees us through. Uh, our God is a God who loves us, and suffering isn't necessarily a punishment. Uh, he loves us, and He's with us through the suffering, uh, and He's there holding us through the suffering. And that was what I came to understand as I was growing up. When bad things would happen to me because of what my mom and dad had been through, they were able to uh, help me understand that philosophy. Was that if something happens and you end up suffering, it doesn't mean that God's angry at you. Um, it just means that God is there with you through the suffering.
Thank you for that. And you spent 25 years in local church ministry before the Navy. What finally
I did.
pushed you from pastoring in the pews to stepping into combat zones?
Well, God used transition time. I had just gotten to a new church in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was there not very long at all. And we had several firefighters and police officers in the congregation. One day after church, they just approached me and they said, "Hey, we think you have a good temperament," which I was like, "Well, thank you. And we think that you would work very well as a volunteer police and fire chaplain for our city. Would you consider doing that?" And so I went to the senior pastor and I asked him if he had any issue with that. And he was all about it. And so I said, sure. And so the city had about 25 volunteer chaplains that had come together and formed what they called the Lincoln Chaplain Corps from various different faith groups. And what they did was they volunteered for the city and responded to emergencies for both fire and for law enforcement, and providing ministry to the firefighters, providing ministry to the officers, but also providing ministry to people quite often on their worst day because of why they were interacting with one or the other. And I really enjoyed that ministry. I loved it. By the end of 8 years, I was actually running the ministry for the city, and it was really enjoyable. It was an honor to be able to walk into the mayor's office, into the police chief's office, into the fire chief's office, and their subordinates, and just say, "How can I pray for you today? What's going on? You know, is there something you just want to unload on somebody and know it's not going to go any further?" And it was a privilege to be able to do that for those in the city of Lincoln. And God kind of used that on me. And then in 2007, my wife and I attended a denominational chaplain training. And while we were there at that training, um, there was actually just very few law enforcement chaplains. The majority of there were military. And that was the first time I'd ever been around military chaplains. And as we were there at that conference, I kind of felt God saying, "This is why I brought you here. I want to call you into military chaplaincy." And like Moses at the burning bush, I'm telling God all of the reasons why he's just absolutely wrong. God, there couldn't be any way you're calling me to do this. No possible way. And so I had come up with 3 excuses why I couldn't possibly do this. And literally in that conference, God took every excuse away. And so the first excuse was, "God, I'm already too old. I'm already past the age that they want chaplains to come into the military. So I couldn't possibly come in." Literally at the next session, they're talking about how the Navy and the Army are needing chaplains, and they're waiving the age requirement. And I thought, well, phooey, there we go. And so then I said, "Well, God, I don't have the right degree," because at that time I had a master's of church music, I had a master's of leadership, but I did not have the master of divinity that they wanted. Next session. Now, keep in mind, this is 2007. They start talking about these brand new things, these online accredited seminaries that you can go to, that the Navy and the Air Force and the Army, they're all taking as accredited, and you can get in that way. And I thought, well, he's 2 for 2. I thought I really had him for the third one, because at that point I was a healthy dude. I weighed over 300 pounds. And so I said, "God, I'm a big boy. There's no way I'm going to hit the height weight requirement." And God goes, "Well, there's this thing called a diet and exercise." So I gave up. I said, "Okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, this is what I'll do." But boy, I would really appreciate it if you could tell my wife, because the idea of telling her I'm going to rock everybody's world just terrifies me. Not that she's a mean person. She's wonderful. She's the love of my life, and she's my biggest supporter. It's just, I knew it was just going to turn her world upside down. So that evening, we're walking back to the room. And, have you ever seen those movies where you're walking down the hallway and it just seems like the hallway extends out even longer?
And stretches.
And so that's how I'm feeling as we're walking back to the hotel room that night. I'm just thinking, when we get in that door, I got to tell her the news. And so we're going, we get in the room, I close the door, I turn around, and she puts her finger in my face and says, I think God's calling you to military chaplaincy. And I'm like, he really did tell her, and, we pray for something and then we're shocked when God answers the prayer. And so we sat up talking that night about everything that would involve, what it would take for me, how I would need her and the family support and everything that we would need to do. And I remember very, very vividly my wife saying, if this is what God is calling us to do, how can we do anything else?
Absolutely.
And I just remember thinking, I am just not worthy of this woman, period, end of story. And so the next day we talked to our denominational folks, and they were encouraging, but very honest. They said, you've got some hurdles you've got to do, but we'll be side by side with you if you work on them. And so they were extremely supportive. And so we came back home for Christmas that year. I enrolled in online seminary at Luther Rice Seminary in Georgia. Go Luther Rice. Thank you, guys. My wife, for Christmas that year, gave me hours with a personal trainer. Or as I joke with my friends, she paid a 22-year-old to try to kill me. It seemed that way, at least at the beginning. And then I took what I needed to do to that 22-year-old, and I just said, look, this is what I'm trying to do. This is where I need to be. This is what I have to be able to do. And he didn't laugh. He sat down and he developed a plan to get me there. And in 18 months, I had my Master of Divinity because of some hours of my previous degrees transferred over, and I was 110 pounds lighter.
Wow.
And gained a little bit of that back. Gotta get to work again. But there I was in the Omaha MEPS, duck walking with a bunch of 17-year-olds trying to get into the Navy. And there I was. And from there, I went to Officer Development School in Newport, Rhode Island, where they teach you how not to embarrass yourself wearing the uniform. And then from there, spent 5 weeks at ODS in Newport, and then went to Columbia, South Carolina, where the Navy Chaplain School was at the time. It's now back up at Newport. And spent 7 weeks at the Navy Chaplain School learning how to provide ministry in a military environment. And after that, they sent me to the Marines. The Navy, when they send you to the different locations, the person who assigns you is called the detailer because he details your orders to where you're going. That's why they call him that. And so I remember talking to the man, and here I am coming in at 45 years old. And all of the other people that I knew that I'd gotten to know who were coming in, they're getting all these locations all over the world. And I talked to him, and he goes, okay. He goes, your choices are Marine Corps, East Coast, West Coast, pray about it, call me tomorrow.
Nice.
And so I talked to some folks and made my decision and called him back the next day. And I said, well, I'll start at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I heard that's a great place to start. And he says, okay, good. And I said, so do you mind if I ask you a question? And he goes, sure. I said, these other people that I've met who I'm going to be going to chaplain school with and everything else, you gave them all of these choices. I got Marine Corps, East Coast, West Coast. And he starts laughing. And he goes, He goes, "Boy, you and I are about the same age. So I'm sending you to the Marine Corps now because if I send you to the Marines any later, they could kill you." And I was like, "Well, okay." Um, but I went to the Marines, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, obviously, Afghanistan was not fun, but I loved being with Marines. As a matter of fact, I've enjoyed every single tour I've had. I've been very blessed to have been able to work with the Marines, to be a chaplain of a ship in the Navy, to work with the Coast Guard because the Coast Guard uses Navy chaplains. So I've been very blessed to be able to minister to those in all three of those sea services.
Now, on a side note, when they realize what you're there for and the position that you're striving for,
Hmm.
do are these young guys, do they kind of tiptoe around you, or they see you as a figure of experience to lean into, or how were you greeted by those 17-year-olds, duck walking next to them, and how was that experience for a person in your position?
It's really interesting, especially since I had children that age at the time, and um, once I got to the fleet um, and put on the uniform, uh, the respect for chaplains in all three services is immense. They see you as a voice of experience. They see you as a person who wants to help make their life better. Um, and so, uh, you know, a few people might not think very highly of you just simply because they're might be anti-religion or have had a bad experience. But by and large, um, you're treated with love and respect from the very youngest member all the way to the commanding officer, uh, because they know that we're not there with a particular agenda other than to try to provide spiritual guidance as well as life guidance. And we're not there to try to get something out of it on our own. They know that we're there 100% for them. And that means a lot to them. And so every day I have people of all ages coming to see me to share things that's going on with them, wanting sometimes all they want to do is vent, and that's what I provide for them. Sometimes they want to vent and then ask for my opinion, and I will give that. Sometimes they'll ask for guidance for different things, and sometimes they'll come in as couples, and just as I would in a local congregation, I'll provide marriage counseling. Uh, and so I've been very privileged in that everywhere I have gone, I have been loved and accepted, and that has been just wonderful in every single billet I've been in.
Mm. And you've walked with service members and others through experiences that don't just break the body, but may fracture their conscience and identity without breaking anyone's confidentiality. And I know you've garnered all your experience in your book. Can you share a moment that made you realize that this isn't just PTSD?
Sure. I remember um, one moment when I was at the Aspire Center, and I had a retired Marine who had come to me and he said, "Chaps, I just have absolutely no idea who I am anymore." Um, he had PTSD from his multiple combat deployments, but he also had moral injury in that his response to the PTSD and his actions once he came home went completely against everything he believed in. And then when he was
S-
forced to retire
ju-
from the Marine, go ahead.
just real quick, just so those who aren't familiar with that, and can you please explain to us moral injury?
Sure. Well, we know PTSD is fear-based trauma. It's something that happens to us where we are terrified, we may feel like our life is threatened, and it's the trauma is so deep that it breaks us emotionally. Uh, what moral injury is, it's kind of like the evil twin to PTSD. Moral injury is when you do something, sometimes under the authority or orders of someone in authority over you, or maybe you choose to fail to prevent something, and the result of which goes against everything you believe in, morally, ethically, and especially spiritually. And that breaks you to the point where you just become consumed with guilt, with shame. You come to believe that you're unforgivable and unlovable, and that the best thing you can do for everybody is just move away from your family, from your friends, from your faith. It you isolate yourself, um, because you feel you're just corrupted to the soul, or that your soul is just literally shattered, and you don't see a way back from that. So you isolate yourself so that you don't corrupt anyone else around you.
Okay, thank you for that, and please
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, so he was dealing with both PTSD and moral injury, and he had completely lost his identity because he had been forced to retire from the Marine Corps. He and uh, Because number one, his body just couldn't do it anymore, and number two, he had reached over 20 years, and his family had desired for him to retire, so he retired. But once he no longer put on the uniform, he didn't know who he was anymore. He had absolutely no idea. So his response to that was uh, cannabis and drugs, and to the point where his family had to kick him out of the house because of what he was bringing home and doing at home. Um, and so at that point, he had gotten clean, and we were talking about this, and he said, I have absolutely no idea who I am anymore. So I said, so what we did was, instead of being a Marine, which, you're a former Marine, you're not a current Marine, what are other things in your life that you are? And we began to explore all those different areas. He was a father, he was a husband, he was a grandfather. Um, and So I asked him, "What's most important to you?" And obviously, it was his family. And so then we began to focus on some things that helped him what he needed to do to be able to return to his family. But it was so that what it wasn't just PTSD. It was dealing with everything that he had done in response to PTSD and moral injury, because there had been one battle he had been in where he had killed a significant number of insurgents. Um, and it was actually documented in his record. And at the end of the battle, he was glad he was alive, but it ate to him that he had killed that many human beings. And so that began the corruption of the soul, where he just saw himself as a killer and nothing else. And we had to begin to walk him, and obviously if he's the killer, that's not part of PTSD. And so that was the moral injury. And so then we started walking him back, seeing that his identity is not that of a killer, but of other things.
Mm. And that's amazing because it's very hard for a person to do that for themselves, to do self-discovery into what is at the core who you are, but to have someone help you walk you through that.
Hmm.
Because I'm still in that kind of state with what I've gone through with my traumas, and relieving that and getting past the actual trauma, but also understanding that was a weight on me. And then once that weight was off, I'm like, who am I?
Hmm.
Who am I? I've been reacting to my trauma for decades. I've been letting that define me. So then how am I going to discover who am I, the person that I should be minus that?
Right.
So that's an internal question that I'm still trying to answer with my journey.
Hmm.
And it's great that you're doing that with others, and especially putting that in a book. You're reaching people who you may not know yet, and that's great.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. I've some folks have found me actually on Facebook because I am on Facebook, and and I am on LinkedIn as well. Um, and a few folks have privately messaged me on Facebook after reading the book, um, and saying that it helped them to realize, because they thought that they were in some sort of weird PTSD place. Then after reading the book, they realized um, that what they were struggling with was actually moral injury, and it helped them to be able to start that path of restoration. Um, and I even had one spouse who had bought the book and read it and realized I she said, I realize now I completely misunderstood what my husband has been going through.
Mm.
And so now she's using the book as a way to support him in his path of restoration.
And I'll be clear and complete with you. And I right before we began, I downloaded the book. I have it on Kindle. So
Okay.
I'm definitely gonna read that, and everything that you've been describing to me, and it sounds like something that might, ring my bell, which I'm doing that slowly with every person who I'm interviewing, who has these awesome books that they put out, whether it's for themselves or a story. And these are one of the things that, because I'm doing this podcast, honestly, I'm doing this podcast for myself. I'm
Mhm.
doing it for my own journey and self discovery, and then learning and connecting from people that have these amazing insights and views. And I understand that, because when I was working for, because I'm in New York, I used to work in IT for the fire department, and we
Okay.
would we would work with on a, I guess, with the on a technical basis with the chaplains, because they were
Mhm.
older, so they needed some guidance with the technology.
Trust me. See this thing? When I have a problem, I call my grandson.
And speaking with them and and guiding them through, and they would tell me, they'd be like, son, you have an amazing patience. And we would talk and talk to the point where my boss would come in and like, are you done? I'm like, well, yeah, well, I'm working and talking at the same time. And it was great to talk and bounce off ideas, and just they would listen, and they appreciated somebody who had the same type of um insight and just patience and a good ear, basically. So I definitely, that's very rare, and for a pastor it just seems like that's, you guys got that in spades.
Oh, I
And
appreciate that. Are you in the city, or are you
I was. That was I left in about I was working there from 2017 to 2023,
okay.
and worked in headquarters in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Brooklyn's where my son lives.
And I seen you on Facebook. You have a beautiful family, and I wanted to ask, how was that in during the hockey game? like when they put you up on the jumbotron and everything to thank you for your service. How was that?
Very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Uh, I'm an introvert by nature. I force myself to go and interact with people, and then I go to my office or I come home and recharge. Um, because this is what God called me to do. So I'm perfectly happy sitting in a corner, playing on my computer, reading a book, but God has called me to something else. So I go out, I interact with people, I love on them, and then I come home and recharge. And I love going to hockey games. I love it. Um, and so we were so happy when they started a minor league team here in Palm Springs, just a little bit away. So what he was referring to is in December they honored me as the service member of the game, which was really cool. I got a nice jersey. But then they stood me up in front of the people, and while they read my bio, I had to just stand there and wave during the camera. And then during the rest of the game, people are running up to me, shaking my hand, which for a person with PTSD is not fun. But I was very honored. My wife and a friend of mine nominated me, and I was very honored to be accepted. And I really appreciate the Coachella Valley Firebirds for honoring me like that. I would have been perfectly happy if they just put a video up me. So,
Hey, but you look like you were enjoying it. You look like you had a great time, and
my wife was saying, "Smile, smile."
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, for pastors and ministry leaders listening, what are some subtle things they might be seeing every Sunday that there are signs of moral injury sitting in their pews?
Some things that they might be seeing. They There might be people who commit to everything, but they won't go very deep spiritually. It's just all surface stuff where they may work in the nursery every Sunday, but they won't come to a Bible study. Or um, the person who sits in the back during the service, and when it's communion Sunday, they leave before communion every single time. Um, or they may be somebody that you can tell who used to be very, very active, and then all of a sudden they're just gone. They disappear. And sometimes it's because they got upset at something. Sometimes um, it's because they did something and no longer feel worthy to come. Um, and so those are just a few examples of what they might see, or you might hear comments like, "I could never tell my story. You would never treat me the same again." Or um, God is love, but I just don't think he can love me. Or something like, "I know God forgives, but I don't think he can forgive what I've done." Those are all things that people in ministry, or quite frankly, even people sitting next to them in the congregation, might hear from somebody who's struggling with moral injury.
Now, in I guess in a light touch way, and I don't know if I think I have a question about this, but it goes right with this one. To ask it now is that to recognize that is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, I feel, would be how would a light approach to that person? How would that look like? How would that?
A
How?
light,
Yeah.
yeah, a light approach would be, um, I heard what you said. It sounds like you've had a deep hurt in your life. Um, Tell me what's going on. I'm willing to listen. No judgments, and mean it. You know, um, Listen to their story. Um, don't react in shock because, quite frankly, some of the stories can be horrific. Um, whether you're talking to um, a military veteran or active duty, or a first responder, or a medical provider, or somebody who's undergone a physical assault or verbal abuse or even a sexual assault, because all of that, depending on the circumstances involved, can lead to moral injury. It can even lead to moral injury. What I've even seen moral injury in the corporate world, where someone prepares, say, they prepare a report, and their supervisor says, no, you have to change this, this, and this. It's what the leadership expects. And if you don't change this, this, and this, uh, you're not going to keep your job. So, basically, they're told to falsely report on things, so that the leadership looks better and they get to keep their job. But they're struggling. They know then what the corporation is putting out to everyone is completely untrue. Um, I've spoken, and I know one person um, who left the corporate world because she had to do that multiple times, and she said, I just got to the point where I couldn't look myself in the mirror. And she left the corporate world and went to do something completely different than what she used to do. Um, but that offering a safe place for them. Sometimes it's just to sit with them quietly. You know, they may have to work up to being able to tell you their story. And so sometimes you just sit with them in their pain and just be there for them. It's funny, in the Old Testament, Job's friends, when everything terrible happened to Job, he had those friends who showed up and sat with him in silence for 7 days. And that was great. They were terrific. It was after they opened up their mouths that they totally tanked it. But sitting with him in that time brought him comfort. And sometimes that's what just sitting with them in the silence can sometimes bring that person comfort. And then you can just say something, whenever you're ready, I'm willing to listen, no judgments, and mean it.
No, I definitely resonate with that because even though there's varying degrees of what people go through, one one thing I've seen that's a common theme is, well, nobody's gonna care.
Mhm.
And so I'm guessing you see that a lot. Like, oh, nobody's gonna care about my story. Nobody cares about me. If they did, then they would have seen my pain and approached me, or whatever reason they'll give for that. But is that a common theme you see? Is like nobody cares.
Very much so. Very much so. That is a common theme, because they withdraw from everything, and then they're like, nobody's asked me why I've withdrawn, or nobody seems to care that I pulled back. Um, that is a common theme. Or, God forbid, they're in a church, they're in a place of worship, and they start to tell someone what's really going on with them, and the person reacts in horror. And then they probably leave that place and don't ever come back, because they feel like they've revealed the monster, and that's how the other person reacted.
I know it would be good to know that those listening, that even if they can't respond to somebody who tells them a story that of what they've been through, of their challenges, and it's best to it doesn't cost to comfort, but it also doesn't cost to say, hey, look, I'm not equipped to really understand what you've been through, and maybe you should speak to somebody who can. something like that is a lot, because there would be some people who would just see this wide eyed, like how you say, or like they're like, oh my God, and then just walk away. And that leaves a person empty, drained. I mean, I don't know. You can, whatever it is. Um, but I would say to somebody who's listening to this that they wouldn't, if they tell themselves right now, I wouldn't know what to do or what to say to them. Listening, like how you said, is an awesome thing. It also is letting them know, say, hey, look, I'm not equipped for this. I've dealt with that before where, um, when I was younger, I think he was may have been in my 20s, I was talking with someone and she was bipolar, and we were having a phone conversation, and I still think of it to this day. And she's talking, and I guess she got kind of wound up, and then she stops and she goes, why is my face wet? And we were on the phone, and she's like, why is my face wet? And then she's looking, she said, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was crying. She's like, why was I crying? What was I telling you? And I said, no, you were telling me X, Y, and Z. She was telling me something, I don't remember the exact details. And then she told me that she's like, I'm bipolar, I go through this a lot. And when I speak to people and this happens, um, they basically tend to ghost her. And she's like,
Mhm.
I would understand if you don't want to talk to me. I'm in my 20s. I don't know what to do. I'm young and dumb. I don't, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do, and I never called her back, and that always, in a sense, hung with me because I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but I didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
And
Education is huge, and that's a big part of why I wrote the book, because in my experience, before I came into the Navy, I had no clue what moral injury was. And then I experienced it on the battlefield, but didn't know what it was, didn't know the name of it. Then as I went along in my naval career, and then especially when I came to clinical pastoral education, which is the program to be able to work in a hospital, I learned about moral injury and began to understand more about it. And I also realized that that's a very finite world that really understands what moral injury is. Um, you've got, mental health providers, most of which are in the VA. You've got chaplains, most of which are military or medical. And that's pretty much it, who really understand what moral injury is. So you go outside of those circles, and not many people really understand it. So as I'm moving about the country, going to different assignments, I'm speaking with my various pastors, and I ask them, can you tell me what PTSD is? And most of them could give me a fairly decent definition of PTSD. Then if I ask the question, can you tell me what moral injury is? Every single one of them would say, I have no, I don't know that term. I have no idea what that is. Then when I would explain what moral injury is, every single pastor or ministry leader would say, that describes this individual, my congregation, to a T. And so that's why, for my doctoral project, I put together a training to train pastors and civilian chaplains on moral injury and how to develop a pastoral response to it. Um, and then, as I was working on that and turning that into my dissertation, my wife, who's always the smartest person in the room as far as I'm concerned, my wife, the editor of my dissertation committee, all of them were united in saying, this really needs to be a book.
mm,
And so a friend of mine at the VA in Oklahoma, who's an author, um, he introduced me to his publisher, and they gave me a wonderful editor who helped me take my dissertation and pull all of the academic language out of it and just make it plain spoken language. Um, and because that's what I wanted. I wanted something very direct that described what moral injury was and why the church should care about it, and then how to move forward from there.
That's amazing, and that's it seems that's God again doing the three strikes you're in.
I've never thought of it that I'm gonna feel that. Is that okay? So
Absolutely, you can.
that's what chaplains and ministers do. We don't think of anything ourselves. We just take it from other places, and package it well. Uh,
If it does any good, then it puts a smile on people's faces. That's awesome. You can. I'm good with that.
all right, sounds good. Appreciate that.
Now, what does it take for someone to take that first small risk of telling the truth about what happened to them or what they did and survive that moment that is rooted in shame and guilt? So it's the person who is in need and they may be curious like I can't live this way, but I don't want to take that permanent action for a temporary situation. So how can they do that?
Well, I think you hit the key on it. For many of them, they just feel like they're at the end of the rope, and they kind of get to the point where I'm going to try this one last thing, and if this doesn't work, I may consider removing myself from the situation. I have seen that so many times where this has been the group that we do here on the base. It's called Building Spiritual Strength. And honestly, it's a program run by the Veterans Administration. And so when I was doing my residency with the VA, my thinking was, why are we doing such a wonderful, wonderful program after these veterans are in trouble? After they're living on the streets, after they're kicked out of their homes, after maybe they've lost their careers. Why are we doing that? And so that's when I came here to 29 Palms and I introduced this program to my leadership, they jumped right on board, supported it right from the get-go. The biggest hurdle I had to do was convince the mental health providers that this was something worthy to refer them to because they didn't know me. They thought, oh, here's this chaplain with the good idea fairy. He's just trying to do something new so he looks good. And I don't really blame them for that because there's a lot of people that, all across in every field do that. But once they got to know me, once they understood my heart, then they started recommending people to it. And then it became one of the 4 pillars of the mental health groups that we do here. And so it actually then was, as I talked with the chaplains on base, as I talked with the mental health providers on base, then they actually started to proactively recommend people to the group so they weren't waiting until the last minute. Now, what about those who aren't getting any help whatsoever? That's where I hope and pray that they look for someone who could become a safe space to begin to just sit and cry with at the beginning. And then when they've trusted them with that, to begin to share little bits of their story, because that's typically how it comes out. It comes out in little snippets as they test that individual to see how they're going to react. And then when that individual does not react with horror or shock, then they begin to realize this is a person that they can trust who's not going to judge them. And then they begin to tell more and more of their story.
I don't see how the weight of the military wouldn't even test this in other bases to say, hey, let's let these guys exit with their own internal dignity to know that when they step out for the last time from that base to say, you know, I take it from, my children's book, like, I am strong, I am safe, like I could do this, to know that regardless of what they've been through for their country is going to say, we are releasing you stronger, or at least with the tools to say, hey, if I'm feeling in a certain way, I know what to do. I know where to go. I may know who to speak with, or at least find someone in that space to speak with as well.
I'm very pleased to say, our base was the first to do this, but at last count, and then I would report back to the people who actually wrote the material how well it was doing. And then so now I can say that we started that in 2022. And now there are 52 bases across the world where this program is being done with
That is
with a
awesome.
chaplain and a mental health provider. I would love to take credit for that, but it's not true. I just did the first one, reported it back, and then those individuals who wrote the material then were able to recruit others. And so I'm very excited to say that this is being done in a lot of military bases. So I'm glad to say that we're doing these uh, intervention type groups, and saving marriages, saving careers, and sometimes even saving lives.
Hmm. And no pun intended, even though you don't want to take credit. I mean, the genesis is with you,
Well,
with
the genesis was actually with the people who wrote it. I just ripped them off and gave them credit.
as long as you gave them credit and you
I
you
gave them credit.
you ran with the ball, you hit the puck, whichever you
Uh,
want to go with.
the
Yeah,
people who created the program was Dr. Irene Harris and VA chaplain Tim Uzzard, and they did such a good thing. And now there's even in the VA, there are other people like Dr. Smigelski in North Carolina and Carter Check, who's a chaplain in Oklahoma, who are exploring other avenues of working with moral injury and PTSD and just doing wonderful work.
I would love for you to, after we're done with the interview, please send me their names. I would love to note them on the writing of the podcast of the description.
What I'll What I'll do is tomorrow when I go to work, I want to make sure I spell everybody's name correctly. Then I'll get on the pod batch at work and send all of that information to you. Happy to do that.
Wonderful. I would love to, you know, you guys all worked in tandem to push this forward to help our troops, and everyone should be mentioned, and I really want to do that. And like how you said, you gave them credit, I also want to do the same, as because having you on and talking with you, and you were in your own trenches in your own way with these your fellow soldiers. They need that credit for this program, and hopefully this can go even further and further and further, and just help those even maybe not in the military as well. Are they
Yeah,
doing these in VA hospitals?
they're doing them in VA hospitals. However, Dr. Carter Check, who's with the VA hospital in Oklahoma, he also has an outside ministry that he works with people who they may be military, they may be not, but he has a ministry where he interacts nature with PTSD and moral injury therapy and he calls it HUN therapy, HUN. And he takes people golfing, skydiving, hunting, whitewater rafting. Um, and you don't have to be a veteran to be able to participate in this. You just need to have PTSD and or moral injury. And so I'll send you the link for that Hun Therapy Ministry. And there are other ministries as well. Samaritan's Purse has a ministry for veterans where they take them to Alaska every year and help work through some of their issues. And there are opportunities like that all over the country. You just kind of have to know where to look.
Be interested to know. I don't know if you've ever come across or had any sort of back and forth in a positive way with individuals from the 988 project, that national suicide hotline, if they're aware of this with the moral injury and things of that nature.
I have not had any interaction with them, so no, I have not.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Um, and moving on, spending years in war zones, hospitals, and high stress environments, really changes a person. How has this work changed your own faith, your theology, or the way you pray compared to the Larry who first stepped into ministry decades ago?
Woo, mercy. Um, it's interesting. When I first stepped into ministry all those decades ago, I was a very black and white individual, meaning um, I didn't really give much grace to people who struggled. I'm not happy to say that, but truth is truth. And my own experience with PTSD and working with law enforcement and first responders, and then now working with members of the military. Um, what I have learned is that we are all people who need love and grace,
Yes.
and um, listening to people's stories without reacting in shock and judgment, that's going to spread the love of Christ so much more than coming down with a hammer on someone. And and so that's what I've learned is that I need to react in love and grace and still speak the truth of God's word, but I don't have to do that harshly.
Very well said. And it shows, but there's no but to it. I mean, it shows the growth. It shows the growth. And when people understand that who a person was years ago to who they are now, and you give them the grace of growth to know that, okay, if I'm dealing with somebody a couple of years ago into how they are now, let
Mhm.
me give them the space to see if they've actually changed as a person. Because people do change, regardless of how people see other people, some slower than others.
Right. Very, very true. And I remember, oh gosh, back when I was police fire chaplain, I remember one time one of the duties we had was we would escort uh, women to shelters. Sometimes under the escort if of the police, if their partner was dangerous. Uh, but I remember escorting driving this one lady and her children, and she had turned away from Christianity because of the amount of hurt she had experienced in a church, and she had turned to an alternate religion. And she began telling me her story, and it it was a heartbreaking story. But she began telling me her story, and including the turning from Christianity to this other religion. And I remember when we got there, uh, we sat there for a few minutes while she finished, and she turned to me, and I will never ever forget this. She said, "You know, you're the first person who's ever let me finish my story." Because people kept cutting in to try to tell her how wrong she was, what she needed to do to fix herself, and I just let her talk, and, um, that opened up a whole new world for her that maybe somebody was willing to listen.
That's amazing because I know that power of listening, and only somebody who's been through something or has that awareness of what other people go through to know that, okay, maybe they just need an ear.
Mhm.
And as men, sometimes we feel like, oh, we got to fix everything, or people who have that overbearing personality, they want to say, well, you got it, like how you said, you got to do this or that or XYZ. Just to sit there and listen is a strength within itself, to let somebody be heard. And that's
Mhm.
so hard. It's so hard to hear and to understand when people realize like not many people feel heard in their lives. And once they do, they you can get in like an instant connection with somebody.
I remember distinctly not too long before that incident happened. Um, I was in my church, and I was speaking with somebody, and I noticed she was looking over my shoulder, looking for someone else to come in the door. And at that point, obviously, I did not feel heard at all. And I broke off the congregation. I broke off the communication and then went my own way. And that really stuck with me. I never want to treat someone like I felt in that moment, like somebody was looking over my shoulder, looking for some bigger, better person to walk through the door. And that has guided me, helped guide me since then. So I would encourage your folks, um, always be in the moment with the people you're talking to.
Absolutely. And another thing to grasp is also that, you know, how they always say the grass is greener on the other side, but the grass that you're on also needs to grow as well. It's just as green. And that
Mhm.
perspective and perception of how things should be, it needs to be turned on its head in a sense, you know, to once you change that view, you're like, wait, I am on greener grass.
It's interesting that you say that because the Marines have have a phrase for that.
Mm,
And this doesn't sound like a very Marine phrase, but it is. And it's called bloom where you're planted.
yes. I
And
read that. I think you had that somewhere posted, and I read that. I think you actually were. I think where I read it, you had a speech going, and oh yes, you were giving a speech to a person who was coming in to take over for you. At
yes,
yeah, and that was like one that was like your exiting line to how is it bloom where you're planted.
bloom where you're planted. Because I remember when I went to my very first job as a chaplain, that was some words of wisdom from another chaplain who who said to me, you know, you may not feel like this is the place you want to be, but bloom where you're planted. Let God use you right where you are.
Yeah, and I needed to hear that too today. But that's a whole nother story. Move, man. If I can get into it, trust me, it's one of those deals where going through something and it's like you really wanted something, but then something else shows up,
Mhm.
and so for me, I'm gonna run with that and take that and be like my new position as it be. I'm gonna hopefully bloom there. I'm gonna give it grace and give it the hope that what I'm doing and the next chapter I'm moving into is something that'll cultivate me more than they're getting their use out of myself in that
Oh,
position.
and if it helps, I'm going through that myself right now
Mhm.
as I'm beginning to exit the Navy. And um, I didn't want to exit the Navy. I want to stay. I want to stay till I fall over until, you know, until my walker's making skid marks in the hallway. Uh, but it's time to move on, and so I have to move on to this new place. And so as I do that, then my prayer is, God, where you send me, let me bloom where I'm planted.
And for families and churches who love someone with deep trauma or moral injury, what are some common helping behaviors that hurt, and what does truly supportive presence look like?
We talk, you know, the truly supportive presence is being there with them in the silence, um, telling that loved one whatever you have to say to me, I will never look at you like you're unlovable or unforgivable. Um, because so many of them are so scared to tell their families their story because are afraid that they will be seen as a monster, and what little contact they have with them will just completely go away. And they're keeping you at arm's distance now because they're scared to tell you the story. And in some ways, they may be scared to feel what they're feeling, so they will self-medicate and numb it with what may be on hand. Um, so I would say even when your loved one tries to push back a little, which they will push back, keep trying. Don't give up. Keep saying, I love you. Nothing you have done or will do is going to stop that. And just keep supporting them. Just say, whatever you have to say to me, whatever you think you've done, it's not going to change how I love you. And I know you might think otherwise, but it won't. And I have too many testimonies of people who, after working with them, decided to share what was going on with their spouses and their loved ones. And I actually don't have a story of a spouse running away in fear. Every single story ends with, now, am I saying that that's not a possibility? No, I am not. But what I am saying is, so far, every single story ends with the spouse hugging the individual, saying, thank you for trusting me with this story. I feel like you've let me in. And then that was like the capstone to that individual coming back from all of this.
That's amazing. And how and on the other side of that, how you said is to what not to do, and that's would be like the interruptions and giving your insight, like.
Yeah. Cutting them off, unsolicited advice,
Mhm.
telling them how to fix it. Oh, that one drives me nuts. And that's what I used to be the worst person doing. Um, those three are the biggies. Um, and because we all love that person. We want to see them do better things. But if we jump in and tell them how to fix their lives, all it's going to do is just drive them farther away.
And we talked about how with those in a religious position, or even in general, how they can identify those individuals who are suffering in silence. Um, when you picture the church waking up to PTSD and moral injury, what do you hope changes in how sermons are preached, how confessions and lament are handled, and how leaders are trained?
Great question. What I would like to see is I would like to see pastors and ministry leaders uh, begin educating themselves on what moral injury is. I'd love to be able to go to each and every church and be able to do a seminar, but that's just simply not possible. That's why I wrote the book, because quite frankly, I wrote the book educating pastors and ministry leaders on what moral injury is, and then how to lead training for people in your church to understand it. In chapter 8 of the book, I have an introductory 90-minute training for ministry leaders and volunteers, and then in the same chapter, I have even a half-day training that they themselves could lead after reading the book, and doing it so you don't have to bring in a high-powered speaker. All you have to do is just read the book, maybe read some of the other resources that I list, but they can do this on their own. They can educate themselves and do this. You don't have to bring in a high-powered speaker, um, and you can do it on a budget and educate people in the pews and your ministry leaders and your volunteers. What I would love to see is a care ministry of people understanding PTSD and moral injury, and when their radar is on, hearing certain comments, then they know how to come alongside that person and be a safe place for them so that that walk back to restoration begins.
That's amazing. And I will do my best to make sure that they're aware of your book, or it just goes. And this is something that is sorely needed for those who are walking, how I like to say, they're walking as they're normal, but they have a storm behind their eyes. And you know,
Ooh,
they
that's a
just
beautiful, that's a great picture, a storm behind their eyes.
yeah, because I still have that storm behind my eyes. And it's something that has been lessening. And raising three boys, I don't want to be that father that they're telling stories about, of like, he was a wild person, but
Yeah,
to see that and start my healing journey in the middle of my life, it put me in a different place, a different perspective. And raising children, having a family, having a home, you can't walk around like you're almost about to crumble, and you're only strong when adversity rears its head. And then you go back to you know how was it, like the crumbled up chocolate bar in the wrapper. Everybody knows
that's
there's something wrong with it, but it's like they don't want to open it because they don't want to deal with that. So
very
yeah.
true. Very true.
Now, sir, finally, where can those who see themselves in those that you've helped and want to explore and get curious about their healing journey, how can they connect with you and Restoring the Broken, your book, if they're ready?
Well, we're going to have in the show notes my email and the link to the book, which then gets you to Amazon. The reason why I send you to the book is because that helps me know how many people are getting it. If you just go straight to Amazon, I don't get those numbers. Um, Praise God, I still get the royalties, but I don't get those numbers.
Oh,
Um,
and to talk about that before you go through, does your publisher sell directly? I'll include both links, 'cause I go through that as well.
mhm.
The Amazon royalties are, ooh, but the all the
I,
publisher
right now,
royalties are better.
yeah, right now we're doing everything through Amazon,
Okay,
and
okay.
and this is my first experience writing a book. So right now we are doing everything through Amazon, and I so much appreciate my publisher, Smart Publishing, for guiding me through this process. But they can email me, and as that will be in the show notes, and then we'll also have the book website, which will give a little bit of a background about me, and then talk about the book, and then tell you where you can get it.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your time, your insight. I thank you for creating this book. I thank you for being on your journey that intersected with mine. And thank you for this interview. Like, I really mean it. Like, I needed it. And,
My
you
pleasure.
know, thank you for your service. Thank you for having a wonderful family that supported you in this journey of yours. And if you ever want to be back, please let me know. And again, just a huge
Or feel free to
thank you.
ask me. It would be an honor.
Of course, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar. That was an impactful episode. If you needed proof that one person can turn pain into an established system, created by wonderful doctors that helps others heal, Larry's story is it. We heard how he moved from church ministry to military chaplaincy, discovered and helped build a PTSD program now running on dozens of military bases worldwide, and kept coming back to the same mission. Be a safe place, listen without judgment, and help people find the courage to tell their story to help find peace. Adelante, siempre, por tu mente, forward, always, for your mind. This is the FYI, I Am Damaged podcast.
In a bright green jungle where the tall trees sway, lived a little elephant who felt big fins. Every day Logan loved to splash and play by the riverside, but sometimes wobbly legs made him wanna run and hide. Tummy doing flips like a stormy shaking drum. A tiny voice inside him whispered, what if I can't have fun? Then Brandon the wise monkey smiled from the tree, said, little friend, take a breath, come and sit with me. Feel your feet on the ground, feel your hand on your heart. We're breathing together, that's how courage starts. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish. When my mind feels wiggly like a monkey in the trees, I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Step by step forward through this, scared and know what if. Even when my tummy feels funny and tight, I can still be brave, I can still shine bright. Next day in the jungle they played a game of tag. Logan felt the nervous pull, his body started to drag, but he remembered Brandon and the tools he had inside. Took a deep gentle breath instead of running off to hide. Breathe in the sunshine, breathe out all the fear. Stomped his big elephant feet and felt his courage appear. With the wiggle of his front can a lap so free, whispered to himself, there's a lion heart in me. His friends saw him smiling as he joined in the game. They asked, Logan, what's your secret? You don't look the same. He said, when my thoughts get loud, I don't have to stay small. I breathe and move my body and I stand up tall. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish. When my mind be wiggly like a monkey in the trees, I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Step by step forward through the scared and oh what if. Even when my tummy feels funny and tight, I can still be brave, I can still shine bright. Little heart listening, this song is for you. It's okay to feel scared, that feeling's true. But just like Logan in the jungle so wide, you've got quiet, steady strength living inside. So breathe in slowly, feel your feet on the floor. Let your shoulders soften, you don't need to. Whisper to yourself when the worries rush through. I am strong, I am safe, and I know what to do. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish. When my mind feels wiggly like a monkey in the trees, I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Step by step forward through the skin and know what is. Logan showed the jungle and I show the world. There's a strong-minded hero in every boy and girl. In the bright green jungle when the stars shine above, brave little hearts fall asleep feeling safe.